Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. The extraordinary alacrity with which the UPA government has brought out an ordinance to amend the laws related to rape has surprised many people. The alacrity shown matched the urgency displayed by the Justice Verma headed committee in coming out with an elaborate report in just a month's time following its constitution. However, the promulgation of the ordinance just 3 weeks before the parliament session is scheduled to begin has also raised questions over its procedural propriety. Opposition is also coming thick and fast from women's groups and other sources who are unhappy with some of the recommendations of the Verma panel being ignored. However, the government's decision to accept death penalty to rape accused in rarest of rare cases, while Justice Verma's report did not recommend it, has also raised the hackles among some of them. Today we will discuss all this while asking the question, has the anti-rape ordinance been able to balance the various demands at all? To discuss this, I have with me Professor Upendra Baxi, an eminent law scholar and former Vice-Chancellor of Delhi University, Reva Nayyar, former Secretary, Union Women and Child Development Ministry, Priya Hingorani, Supreme Court Advocate and former Secretary of the Supreme Court Bar Association, Maitreyi Gupta of the Lawyers Collective Research and Advocacy. Welcome to all of you. Let me first go to Professor Baxi. Professor Baxi, this ordinance, though it came in such a short time, the report of Justice Verma came, and then soon after that, in just a couple of weeks' time or less, this ordinance has been brought in. You think that this could have waited till the parliament session started? Professor Baxi?
It could have. Everything can wait indefinitely. And this has been the complaint of all the sections of civil society, that no expeditious action takes place.
Right.
Of course, this could have waited for the budget session.
Right.
On the other hand, the Verma committee itself recommended that an ordinance be passed,
right,
to enact a common agreement across the board, taking into account the views of previous law commissions and all the submissions made before it.
Right.
Now what has happened, of course, is that the government in its wisdom has read differently the existing consensus to include some items,
right,
and not all the recommendations of the Verma committee.
Right.
But not all is lost, because ordinance is a temporary measure,
right,
subject to full discussion in Parliament, where each one of us can articulate our wisdom and press for structural reform of law.
So considering the state of affairs, the kind of mood in this country about these issues, you think that bringing about promulgating an ordinance was the right thing to do?
It was, and some may say it is not. I've lost a good deal of activist friends already by suggesting that the ordinance does no harm. It could have done greater good by including a wider range of suggestions.
Right.
But quite a few of them are controversial and there is no political consensus.
You're talking...
The way to build consensus is to build on the present ordinance and go much beyond it.
Okay. Professor Baxi, one of the controversial things which has been brought about in this ordinance is about death penalty to the rape accused in rarest of rare cases. You think this was something which Justice Verma did not recommend in his recommendations? You think the government bringing it in here has been brought under pressure?
I don't know. I am not privy to the government working. I speak as an independent observer.
Right.
And I think there is as I read the ordinance, only an option suggested in certain cases,
right,
of death penalty. Already death penalty exists when rape, aggravated rape results into the death of the victim.
Right.
Already there exists the requirement of the Supreme Court that no matter what the law prescribes,
right,
death penalty may only be awarded in the rarest of the rare cases.
Right.
That's a decision not given to the legislator or the president, but to the Supreme Court justices.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, Professor Baxi, please stay on. I'll come back to you. Reva Nayyar, you know, in this case, the other issue which has been exercising the minds of the people is about the age of the juvenile. You know, you have been a Secretary of Women and Child Development in the ministry. This raising of the, or you know, rather bringing down the juvenile's age, do you think it's a good suggestion? This ordinance has not said anything about it.
You see, this ordinance has not touched on it because it's a controversial issue.
Absolutely.
There are many opinions on this. As you know, the Juvenile Justice Act was made and amended very recently. We have had several amendments to it.
Right.
And the whole philosophy behind juvenile justice is reform of the child, give him a chance in life.
Right.
Now, the fine line between the ages of 16, 17 and 18, one day before you are 18, you're a juvenile, and one day after you're 18, you become an adult.
Right.
This is what has got everybody excited now, because in this offense, he's very short of the age of 18, very few days short of the age of 18. And it seems to be a crime where it looks, the whole thing was deliberate, contemplated. In many ways, he was the gang leader of the 5 or 6 culprits.
The question, Reva Nayyar, is that, you know, do laws get made on the basis of one single case?
No, as Justice Verma himself said the other day in one of the interviews, he said, it's not, law is not triggered off by one case.
Absolutely.
But you know, rape, have been many cases of rape in this country, many heinous cases of rape, many cases of rape where people have gone even scot-free. Because, you know, as you know, to get a conviction itself is hard enough.
Absolutely.
And with the kind of sentences we had, it wasn't punishment enough. So I do agree that we have to dwell on this, as in Western societies. Age between 16 and 18, say 17 and 18, it will have to be some discretion given even under the Juvenile Justice Act. It needs to be looked at again.
Okay. I want Priya first to, talk, say what you want to say on this juvenile age business. And I'll go back to Professor Baxi on this quickly, then I'll come back to you on other issues.
Well, I think definitely we need to give it a relook, because the way the times have changed, the way the society has changed, the fact that children at the age of 13, 14 have become more adult in this society with internet and Google, etc. We need to look at it. They're
also developing physically faster.
Physically faster. We need to have a relook. And definitely, I think we need to bring about exceptions or changes in the law to where such cases, such hard cases are given a harsher punishment or separate punishment, rather than, yes, reformist attitude is what is required and we are doing that. But it doesn't seem to be working. So we really need to give it another
Professor
look.
Baxi, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think there are certain international child rights conventions and protocols which need to be respected in any decision that we may eventually take.
Right.
I'm aware that there are possibilities of grading the age depending on the gravity of the offense. I just heard that the Supreme Court is already entertaining a public interest petition on this subject.
Right.
And has already asked the Union government to file its response, unfortunately exclusively of wider public participation.
Right.
Regardless, I think, I believe all legislations are experiments in social change.
Right.
So if something is not worked properly in terms of balancing rights and respect for all citizens, we need to rethink the position. How far and how much is something that the ordinance could not have accomplished.
Okay.
It would have been wrong for the ordinance to address this topic.
When you, Professor Baxi, when you are talking of international conventions and things, are there any other countries where the juvenile age has been brought down in such circumstances?
Well, I'm not an expert in this area, but I know that certain countries, including the Commonwealth,
right,
have sort of graded age distinctions, as Ms. Nayyar was talking about, between 16 and 18.
Right.
It's entirely possible to say 17 and a half, or between 17 and 18.
Right.
There might be some gradation, if not between 16 and 18, or sexual assault or severe offenses.
Right.
These are matters that they must be discussed fully and rationally.
Okay. Reva Nayyar, coming to the other issue about, some of these the ordinance doesn't address some of the issues. Like Professor Baxi himself has raised this issue in his article today also about crimes against women in the context of communal clashes, ethnic clashes, caste clashes and things like that. This ordinance doesn't deal with it. Even Justice Verma committee did not deal with it. Do you think it should have been dealt with?
It will be difficult to deal with that under I think under this reformed rape law, because what happens in a riot or a mob situation or a communal riot situation is slightly different. We will have to give that as one of the exceptions or one of the areas within the broader law.
Right.
It cannot be equated with the rest of the law because these are not intended rapes. These are not crimes at the same level as the normal rape that takes place. This is in the heat of the moment. There are groups. It is difficult to show mens rea of one person and to isolate that one person from the mob that does it. So I think we'll have to think a bit more on it, although I think it's needed. It is definitely needed.
Professor Baxi, this is an issue which you have yourself raised, about this crimes against women in these kind of situations. Don't you think that the existing laws the existing laws deal with these issues?
No, they don't, because quite simply, they do and they don't. Forgive me. They do in the sense of defining a riot, enmity against religious and other groups and so on. But we needed, for example, the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Atrocities Act to define specific forms of caste-targeted violence.
Right.
Now, we don't have a comprehensive understanding or a legislative device which regards production of communal so-called and ethnic violence as politically organized events. And we know it, that this is exactly what it is. These are not riots. These are not accidental, unintentional crowd manifestations of behavior. These are specifically planned and executed events for which there is complete immunity under Indian criminal justice system. And women are the worst victims, women and children, of such political violence.
You have raised the issue of Gujarat.
Whether Chief Justice Verma himself, as the chair of Human Rights Commission, acted with great and enormous success in addressing this kind of programmed violence. Whether or not he judiciously refrained in his report, overloading it with this suggestion, is another matter. But I think a time has come really for a comprehensive code of violence against women and children and people of different sexual orientation. This piecemeal tinkering with law reform is good, but not good enough.
On that note, we need to, but this common code which you spoke about is an interesting thing. We will discuss this further. But before that, we need to go into a short break. Now, please keep watching. We'll be back very soon. Welcome back. We are discussing the anti-rape law ordinance which has been promulgated and looking at how it is able to meet the demands. Reva Nayyar, Professor Baxi was talking about a code, a common code for all this violence against women, children and sexual minorities. These piecemeal amendments which are brought about ultimately doesn't serve the purpose. Has there been any serious effort on this kind of a code at the government's level in your own experience or later?
No, I don't think there has been. There was a lot of work done on the amendment of rape laws. And I know for 7 or 8 years, the amendments were taken and sent to Parliament. But I don't think we have worked on the communal, the riot situation, people with different sexual orientation, how they are treated, how they are harassed. That kind of sexual harassment we have not discussed in total. Perhaps many sections of the IPC would need to be looked at.
Priya, you think this common code is a good idea, and where do you begin with?
Absolutely, it's a good idea. We've been asking for the Uniform Civil Code vis-a-vis women's personal laws for a long time. But even that has not come about. But I think we have to start, as Reva ji says, with the IPC and the CRPC, the amendments in that, and a comprehensive law can be brought about. But I think Justice Verma's committee has done a fair deal. It's a very, very positive and a good step ahead to bring about these amendments. And let's at least start on that and let them come through. And there's always scope. See, according to me, making laws is one aspect. It's the actual implementation, it's the actual conviction rate. If that goes up and if the implementation is done in a proper manner, that's what will be the biggest deterrent for these kind of things, nothing less.
As far as Professor Baxi, one of the other issues which came up during this debate on after the unfortunate gang rape was about the way the security, way the police, way the whole system, even the judiciary reacts to these kind of cases. You know, you think in this ordinance there is any such measures which can improve the policing, which can improve the judicial, the way the judiciary handles these kind of cases?
Well, these are very important concerns. I'm glad you raised them. Obviously, it is for the executive in charge of law and order and common human security to act with great conscientious care,
right,
to prevent such horrendous situations. And I believe some steps are already underway.
Right.
The question of civic apathy,
right,
common citizen looking the other way,
right,
cannot be addressed by law reform.
Absolutely.
It has to be addressed by articulate and anguished civil society today, turning the question inward,
right,
to urban and other middle classes. So the citizen responsibilities is a subject that we ought to continue to keep alive, regardless of what we think of this ordinance or that measure of the government.
Right.
As far as judicial reforms are concerned, I don't understand why we can't develop a sensible set of guidelines for sentencing. Most countries from which we derive our jurisprudence have commissions that propose sentencing guidelines for various offenses,
right,
which lay down how the right to bail should be adjusted with wider considerations of human security. Here we go by judge to judge, court to court, lawyer to lawyer, situation to situation.
Right. Okay, Professor Baxi,
this is not
I know, Professor Baxi,
permissible.
Professor Baxi, this judicial reform is a separate issue in itself, a separate debate in itself. We will, I'll come back to you. Maitreyi Gupta is with us. Maitreyi, your collective has raised a very important and very significant issue in this entire debate. You represent or you advocate for the cause of the sex workers. You people seem to be having some problems with this ordinance when it comes to sex workers.
Right. So, Lawyers Collective seems to think, we believe that trafficking and the provision on rape, which includes exploitation. Now, exploitation has been taken to mean prostitution.
Right. Reva Nayyar, this is an issue. The sex workers, they have come out, they say that this ordinance which has been brought about criminalizes their activity. Even those people who are voluntarily involved in this occupation, they get criminalized. This ordinance criminalizes them.
I don't think it's meant to apply to the licensed sex workers or the sex workers who are working in this area from their own voluntary choice.
Right.
This law certainly will not apply to them. I do not think that is the intention of this law. This law is for actual violence and rape. It's against non-consensual rape. I mean, that is not rape. Sex worker is not a rape.
In fact, Priya, what they say, what this Maitreyi Gupta and her, there is a national network of sex workers which they are dealing with. They say that this ordinance does not differentiate between coercive prostitution and prostitution. They have included both prostitution and coercive prostitution together, and that would mean that everybody all the sex workers who are voluntarily involved in it also get, come under this.
No, I don't think so. That's not what, as far as I have understood or read, that's not what the ordinance says. And not only that, the recommendation of the Justice Verma committee, which says that the moral character of the victim will not be taken into account, is something which has been accepted by the government. And the whole issue of the ordinance is that where consensual rape is there, and also those people who are victims of gang rape or rape. So I don't think the sex workers are actually being looked into or considered or talked of in this kind of thing. Now it's a question of interpretation. So I think they should hold their horses till the...
I will tell you there is one exception though. When the trafficking is been done with very young girls below the age of 18 who are not to give the consent, then I think it would be where the police would intervene and try to apply this law.
Let us get Professor Baxi on this. Professor Baxi, this is an issue which is causing a lot of concern to the sex workers and those people who are advocating their cause. You think that there is some substance in their concern?
Absolutely. I mean, this is one of the demonstration of going around the world in 30 days, in a sense, because the committee had set up a very difficult task for itself.
Yes.
And therefore, I don't think it's a matter of interpretation. The ordinance regards all prostitution as trafficking. As
coercive prostitution.
And this is against the... and I think in haste and hurry to make a statement, it rolls back women's struggle for agency in vocation and profession. I know it's very difficult to make distinction between conscripted sex work and voluntary sex work, but this issue has been addressed internationally and by women's movement and theory in a very intelligent and elaborate way. But the Verma Commission simply ran out of time. And now that is the law under the ordinance. And I think we should take the first opportunity in the consideration of the bill attaching the ordinance considered by Parliament to remove this confusion and make the necessary distinction that has just been urged.
Apparently, there is also a UN protocol on this which India has ratified just in 2011, Professor Baxi.
Yes, but our law reform measures, whether through special committee or law commission or through parliamentary committees, remain rather indifferent to India's obligations under international law. This has been a constant problem. Look at the way Parliament enacted the torture bill. And we had to work very hard, all of us, before the Joint Select Committee to draw attention how it failed to address India's obligations. And the bill is still pending. There are no takers for it. It was recommended in 2010. It's still lying somewhere in the cold storage.
Yes, Reva.
If we are able to just look at the laws, domestic laws, the laws that we have already, Parliament has passed them, they're on the statute book. If we can look at them and get a better conviction rate, have a fast track method of doing these most heinous cases, like rape, rape plus murder, and all the other offenses of sexual harassment, acid throwing, so many others. If we can get a quick conviction, I think that itself will act as a great silencer.
Absolutely. Priya, before we have very little time left, but one of the issues was about compensation to the rape victims. But this ordinance doesn't talk about it.
Well,
isn't this a cause for concern, or you think it's a very too complicated?
It is a complicated issue, so I think it needs to be debated. Whether the compensation should be given at the first instance, at which instance, whether just on when the matter comes up in court. So I think that needs to be debated upon. So that's why, rightly so, it has not been brought on, according to me.
Reva?
You see, the National Commission for Women some time ago had recommended compensations to a rape victim, just like we do for any serious accident. In that case, they had said that state should give some compensation immediately to a rape victim. And something was prescribed. I think Parliament, before the matter is discussed in Parliament, I think those compensation recommendations should be looked at.
Okay. Professor Baxi, two issues. One is about the compensation. The other is the fact that despite the ordinance which has been promulgated yesterday, the gang rape case cannot come under this new law, isn't it? Is that the position?
As to the second question, clearly that's the position, because one may amend the civil law with a back effect retroactively.
Right.
But one may not do so as far as criminal law is concerned.
Absolutely.
As to your first concern, I share, but I think we should widen our imagination of compensation to rehabilitation, restitution, and a whole lot of related measures for the family and kinspersons affected by such tragedies.
Okay.
We cannot just think, I beg your pardon, this on the lines of traffic accident compensation schemes. These are grave human rights violations.
Absolutely.
With which the state is quite complicit in not reforming the policing system, investigative system, and the criminal justice system.
Okay. Okay, Professor Baxi.
So we need a wider view on this.
Okay, Professor Baxi, thank you. We have completely run out of time. But as today's discussions, there are still a lot of issues which needs to be discussed and thought of before this ordinance, when this ordinance is taken up in the Parliament. Hopefully the Parliament will discuss and go over some of the issues, some of the concerns which has been expressed by several groups over this ordinance. We'll wait and see what will happen. Thanks to all my guests, Professor Upendra Baxi, Reva Nayyar, Priya Hingorani and Maitreyi. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on the big picture same time tomorrow.